Hi everyone, we're going to get started with Microsoft Excel 2016. I'm going to follow along with the assignment that we'll begin with in SAM, yet it corresponds to our textbook. So our very first assignment is the Excel textbook assignment. So let me go ahead and locate our course section, and I'm going to make it easier for me to find, so I'm going to go ahead and uncheck the options for exam and training, and so we only see our projects, and it's alphabetical. So the Excel textbook project, that's what we're going to be working on right now. So I'll go ahead and select that link. I will go ahead and hit start, and this is my start file. I'm going to go ahead and download that, but just before I do that, I'm just going to scroll down, and I want to go ahead and copy the file name, because remember, I need to have the correct file name when I upload the file, so I want to make sure that I save the start file with the correct name. So I'm going to go ahead and open this file up in Microsoft Excel. And here we go. So let me go ahead and save this, because notice that my file is read-only. So I'm going to go ahead and do a File and a Save As. I am going to change my save location to my desktop, so I'm going to choose the Browse button. And in my Save As dialog box, under my Favorites options, I'm going to choose Desktop. And right in there for my file name, I'm going to select that, and I'm just going to paste it with the name that Sam wants me to call this. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Save, and I can see at the top that my file has been renamed. Alright, so in this particular module, we're going to talk about spreadsheet software. We're going to take a look at and discuss the different components of the window. We'll then begin talking about formulas. We'll enter in some values and some labels. We'll work with the auto sum button. We'll then go ahead and edit some of our cells. We'll enter a simple formula. We'll look at the different views that we have in Microsoft Excel, and then we'll look at some of our print options. So one of the things we want to remember with Excel is that it is a spreadsheet software. And so another term actually for this is an electronic spreadsheet. So what that is an app that we use that helps us perform numeric calculations, and it also helps us to analyze and present numeric data. And so one of the big advantages of an actual spreadsheet program over pencil and paper is that our calculations are going to be automatically updated, and so that we can just manually change a value and it'll automatically recalculate for us, and that's a beautiful thing. Another thing to want to keep in mind is that what we refer to in Microsoft Excel are worksheets. Sometimes you might hear me say spreadsheet, worksheet. The names are used interchangeably. When we have a collection of worksheets, we refer to that as a workbook. And so when we work with Excel, we have the ability to enter data quickly and accurately. We can recalculate easily. We can perform what-if analysis. We can change the appearance of our information. Once our data is in there, we can then create some charts. We can also share the information, and then we can actually build on some previous work. So your text goes into greater detail about that, but I just highlighted the high points of that particular section. So we want to make sure you're familiar with the Excel window, and when we open up the workbook, we want to make sure that we are familiar with our area right over here. So when we see that little green box that tells us the active cell, this right here where my mouse is currently running over is referred to as my formula bar. And you notice as I am in that area, I'm getting my little screen tip that pops up that tells me that is my formula bar. If I go to the left of that, I see if I need to insert a function, here is my enter key, and this is my exit or cancel. All right. Now notice that they're grayed out. I can't use them because it doesn't apply to what is actually in this cell. So that's why none of these functions are becoming live for me. Some of the other sections that we can take a look at is if we want a new sheet, we would hit this plus button. Here's our mode indicator. It tells me that I'm currently ready. My status bar is this bar right here. This is my my scroll bar rather. And this whole bar down below where ready is, that is actually referred to as my status bar. Bottom right hand corner, we have some of our views. We also have our zoom control. We have our vertical scroll bar over here on the right hand side. And then up top we have our ribbons. Well, our home tab, and then remember when we click on the tab, it displays the ribbons. And inside of each ribbon, it breaks down the tools into groups to make it more manageable for us. I'm going to go on back, and I'm going to stay on the home tab for now. So the very first thing that we want to do is understand what a formula is. And a formula is an equation in a workbook. And we use formulas to make calculations, and they can be as simple as adding a column of numbers, or it can be complex, as if maybe we want to look at a profit and loss projection for a global corporation. And so we want to make sure that you tap into the power that Excel offers and understand how formulas work. So the very first thing we're going to do is take a look at our sheet here. We can see we have a title, and this is some type of payroll calculator. We have a list of employees. We see the number of hours that they did work, if they worked any overtime hours. We also see the rate, the hourly rate at which they worked, and here it's calculated for their regular pay. And if I click in there, I can actually see that a calculation has been placed in there. And then I can look at some additional data for the overtime pay, and this has been calculated, how much was calculated, or how that was actually calculated for me. I can look up there in my formula bar, and then our gross pay. So we're going to be calculating our gross pay here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to click in cell E5, and we can see that this cell contains a formula, and as we mentioned as I scrolled over this, it appears on that formula bar as we mentioned right up here, and all Excel formulas begin with an equal sign. So that's really, really important to remember. So if you want to show the results of adding 4 plus 2, the formula in the cell would look like equals 4 plus 2. If we wanted to show the cell to show the results of multiplying two values in a workbook, such that the value in cell B5 and D5, the formula would look like what we have here. It's equal to B5 multiplied by D5, and that is actually what we see up here in our formula bar. So let's go ahead and click in cell F5, and in cell F5 we see that this cell contains an example of a more complex formula, and this particular cell calculates the overtime pay at the R2G, and so the overtime pay is calculated at twice the regular hour rate times the number of overtime hours. And so we can see that over here. And so we take 2 times the hourly rate. All right, and so as you can see, we use parentheses to create groups within our formula, and that indicates which calculation to complete first. So remember our order of operations, and please excuse my dear Aunt Sally if you recall that, where we had our parentheses, our exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and then subtraction. All right, so we just took a look at some of the cells in here. So the first thing we want to do now is click in cell A15, and in cell A15, if I look at my formula bar, I can click up here and I can type, or I can actually click down here and I can begin typing. And I can also take a look at my mode indicator. That notice it currently says ready, and as soon as I start to type, it is going to change from that mode indicator on my status bar is going to soon read edit. All right, so I'm going to in this particular cell, I'm going to type in totals, T-O-T-A-L-S, and we can see in here the enter key. It appears over here, and I can go up on my formula bar, and now I can actually activate that tool is now activated because I've actually done something. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the enter key, and that places that text in my cell. I'm now going to click in cell B15, and in cell B15 we want this cell to total the hours that's worked by all the trip advisors. And so you might think that you want to create a formula that might look like, 40 plus 35 plus 40, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to add the actual values that we see here in our formula. What we want to add are the cell references, whatever value is placed in that cell reference. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to put in a formula. And we could create our own formula. We could say B5 plus B6 plus B7 plus B8 and all the way down to B14. And we can certainly do that, and that will give us a result. However, if we had a lot of data, we went several lines down, that would get very cumbersome, and that could get very, we could easily make a human error. So we want to rely on, when we have lots of cells that we would need to add, we want to rely on using the built-in functions. And so we're going to go ahead and do that. And what that does is it includes an argument, and what the argument is that information that we need in order to get an answer. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on, I clicked in the cell, I'm going to come up to my home tab, and I'm going to go all the way over to my editing group, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to just notice I hit the arrow to the right, but there's several different common functions. We see these right over here. I'm just going to go ahead and choose auto sum. And what this does is that it automatically makes an assumption about the argument, the information that I need to create this. And so we can see the formula that is created equals sum, and we look over here, we see it's the range of B5 through to and including B14. So we start at B5, and it makes the assumption that I want all of these, and that actually is a correct assumption. So we're going to accept that. So we're going to come up to our formula bar, and we're going to hit the check mark, and what it does now is it actually totals all those cells and places that total there in the cell. Notice that I see the value in cell B15 from making that calculation, but in my formula bar I actually see the formula because there is a formula for how I got to that number 378. I'm now going to click in cell C13, and I want to change that value from 5 to 6, and I'm going to hit the enter key. And as I hit the enter key, if we looked all the way to the right, we would have noticed that our overtime pay automatically updated. So that cell value in F13 automatically recalculated. Let's go ahead and click in cell C18. And I'm going to type in this cell average gross pay. And I'll hit the enter key. Now notice when I hit the enter key, it returns me to the cell below. If I hit the enter on the formula bar, it keeps me in that current cell. Let's click in cell B15. Let's go to B15. Here is B15. And in B15, I want to position my cursor in that lower right corner of the cell. So notice as I place it in the center of the cell, my cursor looks like a plus sign, a rather wide, thick, hollow plus sign, but a plus sign nonetheless. But if I take my cursor and I place it over that bottom right hand corner, I see now that my cursor changes because it's placed on top of that little square. that little square is called a fill handle. And if I hold down my mouse and I drag across, and as soon as I release my mouse, it calculates the values for me. So what it does is it totals all of the columns for me. So I'm going to go ahead and save those changes. Okay, next we're going to edit some of our cell entries. And that's the neat thing about working in Excel, is that we can change the contents of an active cell at any time. And in order to do that, we can double click the cell, and then we can then click in the formula bar, or we can just start typing. And so Excel will switch into that edit mode when you begin making cell entries. All right, so we'll go ahead and let's go ahead and click in cell A5. And we want to click to the right of the P in Peter. So I just double clicked inside there. And on my keyboard, I'm going to go ahead and hit my delete, because I want to remove that I, because Peter was spelled incorrectly. So I went ahead and I hit the I. Now there's another way that you could have done that, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the undo button. And you could have come up here on the cursor in our formula bar, and I could have gone ahead and hit the delete button, and then I could have came over to here and I could have choose enter, and either way would have made that correction. I'm now going to click in cell B6. And I'm going to go ahead and I want to confirm that I'm actually in cell B6. Notice this button over here. This is called our name box, this area over here. It's not a button, rather, but it's a name box. And so that I can confirm that I'm currently in the correct cell. And this time I'm going to hit the F2 button. And what that does is it automatically places me inside of the actual cell. So by pressing F2, it activates the cell for editing directly in the cell instead of in the formula bar. So it becomes a preference of which method you like working with. So we're going to go ahead now, we're going to hit the backspace key. We're going to change that value. Instead of 35, it's now going to be 38. And then we'll go ahead and hit the enter key. So the value in the cell changes from 38 to 35. And the cell B7 now becomes our active cell. So you may have noticed that some of the calculations in cell B15 and E15 also changed. And that's because these cells contain formulas that include the cell in B6 in their calculations. Right? So if at any time you feel like you made a mistake, you can either undo or you can choose the cancel button. Let's click in cell A9. And we're now going to double click on the word Juan in our formula bar. So I'll come up here in my formula bar and I'll double click on the word Juan. And we want to replace that with Javier. And I'll go ahead and I'll hit my enter key. And by doing so, I have now deleted the existing text, and then I replaced it with the new text. Next, I'm going to double click in cell C12. So I'm currently in C12. I actually want to double click, and I want to hit the delete key, and I want to replace that value with a number 4. And then this time we'll come up to our formula bar and I'll hit the enter key. And again, wherever that value is referenced, if it happens to be in a formula, those cells will be updated. Let's go ahead and save those changes. So we can use formulas in Excel to perform calculations such as addition, multiplication, and averaging. And so formulas in an Excel worksheet remember, they start with an equal sign. And this is also actually referred to as a formula prefix. And it's going to be followed by the cell address or a range name values and a calculation operator. So remember, the operators indicate what type of calculation that we want to perform on the cell, or that range or value. And that can include any of the arithmetic operators. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to click in cell G5. And this is the first cell that we want to insert the formula. So we want to calculate the gross pay that we need to add. So what we're going to do here is add our regular pay and our overtime pay. So for employee Peter Brucker, our regular pay is going to appear in cell E5. Our overtime pay appears in cell F5. So here is our regular pay in E5, and here is our overtime pay. So again, I want the formula to be in G5. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to, remember I begin with an equal sign, and I'm going to take my regular pay and I want to add that to my overtime pay, and I come up to my formula bar and I hit the enter key. And as I do, it automatically calculates my gross pay. So I'm going to go ahead and click in cell F5. And so that we see the formula in our cell calculates our overtime pay by multiplying our overtime hours, which is in cell C5, by 2 times, twice the regular hourly rate. So that is 2 times D5. We see that up here. And we want to edit our formula to reflect a new overtime pay rate. So up in our formula bar, to the right of the 2, we're actually going to click to the right of the 2. I see my cursor blinking. And I actually want to type in 0.5. So I actually want to increase my overtime rate. So now the formula is going to calculate my overtime pay at 2.5. So I'm going to go now on my formula bar and I'm going to hit the enter key, and I'm going to see how my overtime pay as well as my gross pay is now automatically recalculated. So I will save my changes. I now want to look at some of the views that we have here. We can change the view of our worksheet window at any time. We can do that by our View tab on the ribbon, or we can look at the View buttons on our status bar. So we can either come up here to the View and activate the View tab, or we can, on our status bar, we see we have additional views. So this, what we're going to begin first with is clicking on the View tab, and we see that we have a page layout button. There's window workbook views. So there's a normal view, which is by default where we are currently at. There's a page break view, and we are asked to look at a page layout. So we're going to go ahead and look at our page layout. And what that does is it breaks our worksheet, and we see it as it would appear as if we were to print this out. Right, so the page layout view provides a more accurate view of how that worksheet is going to look when it's printed. So we see the margins are displayed along with a text box for the header, and our footer box. Also, we'll see that if we were to scroll down to the bottom. But your page may not be large enough to actually view it without scrolling, so we need to scroll on down. All right, so here we can see that footer area. I'm actually hovering in that area. You'll notice when we're in Excel that we have 3 sections. We have a right section, a center, and left. We scroll to the top. Here's my header is on the left. Here's the center section, and there is my right section. So I want to go and I want to click in my left header text box right here, and I want to type in reasons to go. R-E-A-S, reason singular actually, to go. I want to click now in my center header text area, and then here I'm going to type in project leader payroll calculator. So project leader payroll. In the right header text, we're going to type in week 35. Now we want to select a range. All right, so what we want to do is we want to select more than one cell. So that is going to require that we hold down our mouse and we drag. So I'm going to click in cell A1, and I can make sure that I'm in cell A1 right here. And I'm going to hold down my mouse and I'm going to scroll till I get to all the way to G2. So I've selected a range of cells. Now on my View tab, if I can't see my ruler, I want to make sure that my ruler is shown. And so let's go up again and activate that View tab. And I see my ruler. My ruler does have a checkbox in my show group. And I want to make sure that the grid lines is also checked, and it is. So that's good. I now want to click on my page preview button, and that's going to be on my status bar. So if I look all the way down in the bottom right hand corner, this is my page break preview button. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and what that's going to do is it's going to show me where my page is going to break. And so what I want to do is I want to drag that pointer from the bottom of the page break indicator. I actually want to move it to the bottom of row 20. So I'm simply, notice it stops at row 18. I'm going to take my mouse, I'm bringing it over to that page break view, and I see my cursor change. It's now vertical. I'm going to hold down my mouse. I'm going to drag it so that it includes row 20 as well. Let's go ahead and click back on that page layout button. Let's get out of that view. All right, and so we can't actually see it now, but when we look at this, we can see that it's going to include. We see that box that's all the way around it, and all that information is going to be included when we print. We'll go ahead, they want us to go back and click on in our view, on our View tab, in our show button, our show group rather, they want us to click our page layout button, and let's look at, here's my page layout button, and they want us to make sure that we, in our workbook views group, okay, we will look at the our sheet options right here. And am I in the right section here? They want us to be in our workbook views group and click our ruler checkbox and the grid lines check to show those. So they're not actually talking about this area here. Let's go on back to the View tab. And here's our workbook views. Here we go. This is where they want us to change this. So they want us to go to we are in our page layout view, and we're going to make sure it's uncheck the ruler. Notice that my ruler now disappears. I'm going to uncheck my grid lines. All right, now now I notice that my grid lines disappear. All right, so I personally don't like working in that mode, but that's what the text is asking us to do, so we're just working with what the text is asking us. So we'll go ahead and save those changes. Let's click in cell A20. It's harder to find my cells now that my grid lines are off, but in cell A20 they would like us to type our name, so we'll go ahead and then type in, you will type in your name in this box. And I'll go ahead up to my formula bar and hit my enter key. I'm going to go ahead and click my page layout tab on the ribbon, and this time I want to go to my orientation, and in my this is in my page setup group, and I want to change this to landscape, and I'll notice that my page seems to shift, so I am now showing more horizontally than I am vertically. And so we realize that we don't necessarily need this, so I'm going to go ahead, and you can even see by looking at the icon what portrait represents and what landscape represents. I'm going to go ahead and click the portrait and return back into a portrait orientation. Let's notice in the sheet options, let's go ahead and put in printing my grid lines, and let's see, we click the grid lines view checkbox because we want to see them. And notice that actually, when that other view, when we unchecked it, it also unchecked it here. But we actually want to see our grid lines, and we also want to print those. So let's go ahead and look at this. If we were to actually print this, we'll go to File and Print, and we get a preview of the document that we've just created. All right, and I believe that is the end of our chapter.